He's a graduate of MIT. He's been involved in the political scene here in the Tulsa area for many years. And so when you come across his blog or come across information that he's disseminating, you want to pay attention because he has done his research. And I came across an article that he put out recently showing how much money was put into the school board election, which is a non-paid post. And the multiplied thousands of dollars, and I hope he'll touch on that today. But it's an honor for us to have this brother, and I appreciate him. Let's welcome Michael Bates.
Thank you very much, Jesse, and great to hear the report from Adam, from Congressman Hearn's office. Thank you. And he really did a great job of setting some context for what we're going to be talking about today. We just had the school board election back on April 5th. We had several races in which you had a Republican running against a Democrat, but you wouldn't know it to look at the ballot because in Oklahoma, our school board races are nonpartisan. And so even though what happens in our schools is very deeply affected by ideological currents, even though people have who want to undermine and change American culture have found the schools an avenue to accomplish that change, we're told that no, actually schools are non-political and nonpartisan, and we shouldn't consider political labels when we go to vote for school board. So when you go and vote for school board, you see two names, and you see no party indications whatsoever. Nevertheless, we had several races in Tulsa County where there was a Democrat versus Republican running, and yet of the, I believe there are 4 races, we'll get into some details here in a minute, where we had that situation, even though in every one of those races we had more registered Republicans voting than Democrats voting, we only prevailed in 2. One of them, praise God, was Alina Ashley winning in East Tulsa in District 4 over an incumbent Democrat, and was successful in so many ways. And yet, in this part of the Tulsa Public Schools District, Tim Harris, former district attorney, was running against Susan Lampkin in an open seat. So no incumbent, even though Susan Lampkin was backed by the previous incumbent and backed by the people who had funded the previous incumbent to the tune of $35,000, Tim Harris wasn't able to prevail. He fell short in that race. And how is that possible in what we think of as a more Republican conservative part of the Tulsa metro area in a state that has been 100% Republican? Every county, all 77 counties since 2004 has voted for the Republican candidate for president. So where's the disconnect here? And I talk about normies here, normies in political communication. The term, if you've heard James Lindsay speak here on a couple of occasions, he'll talk about normies. These are people who are normal, unlike us who are in this room and are motivated enough to show up and concerned about the culture and concerned about politics to the degree we're willing to actually show up on a Thursday morning to fellowship and to talk and to pray and to think about these issues and to seek out information. Most people are living their lives, and while they may share our concerns, they don't have that strong a motivation. And yet they do go to the polls and they do vote. So how do we connect the information we have with them? And a couple of examples here. You may be aware of Libs of TikTok. That's not really very big there, but This is a posting from April 14th, last Thursday, on Libs of TikTok, and the gentleman in the use the term loosely, in the photo, is quoted as saying, "If your parents don't accept you for who you are, bleep them. I'm your parents now." This is not a teacher from San Francisco or New York City. This is a teacher from Owasso, city of character. Now, thankfully, the Owasso school administration had the good sense to put him on administrative leave to the end of the year, and his contract will not be renewed. Yeah. So people out in the public are seeing libs of TikTok videos. They're seeing that there are teachers in the schools who feel like it's their job. They see us as pagans who need to be converted to their religion, and they see the school as a mission station to reach children and alienate them from their parents. And certainly not all of them by any means, but there are plenty of them, and for the most part, we don't see a massive rising of teachers to tell them, to say, these people don't represent us and we want them out of the system as badly as you do. We're not seeing that kind of reaction. There seems to be more of a circling of the wagons that's happening in public education with characters like this. And on the right side, you see some of the, you can't make the claim that, well, we may have progressives who are in our schools teaching our children, but at least they're doing a good job of teaching the basics. Well, that percentage there, you see 20%, 14%, 20%, 22%. That's a percentage of children in the Tulsa Public School District, grades 3 through 8, who were proficient or advanced in the testing for English and language arts. Second column is proficient and advanced in math. Numbers down, 14%, 17%, 10% of 8th grade. Only 10% of 8th graders were either at a proficient or advanced level. And yet, and people are aware of this. They're aware that there's a problem in our schools, but when it comes time to vote, they don't know how to vote effectively to get the results that they say they want. Here's another example. This is from the State Department of Education website, and you see that as a district, the composite academic achievement score for Tulsa Public Schools is way down at the left end. Only a few districts are worse than Tulsa in terms of our academic achievement. And this is from 2019, by the way. This is not during the pandemic. This is before the pandemic. It's only gotten worse. This chart will show you, and it could have made it better to read. I apologize. I'm going to try to put most of this information up on the website if it's not there already. But what you'll see is we had these 6 races where the Tulsa County Republican Party made an endorsement in a school board race. Typically, as I said, these are nonpartisan races, and historically, parties have not gotten involved. But thankfully, we have leadership. Rhonda Villamont-Smith, our current county chairman, has said in these nonpartisan races like city council and school board, Republicans can take a role. We can help good Republican conservatives and help them have the resources and make connections with volunteers to reach voters and get elected. And yet, as you see, on the right-hand side, you'll see the numbers of people registered to vote in various parties that turned out on April the 5th. In District 7, in Tim Harris's race against Susan Lampkin, it's 25, see if I can read it better here. Yeah, 2,552 voters who are registered Republicans showed up to vote. Tim Harris only got 2,256 votes. So we underperformed. In fact, in every race, even though we prevailed in Alina Ashley's race in District 4, and we prevailed in the Tulsa Tech race where incumbent Mark Griffin, a Republican, was running against the husband of a liberal Democrat state representative, even though we prevailed in those 2 races, even there we fell short of reaching the Republicans that actually showed up to vote on the day. And perhaps we could have motivated more Republicans, more conservatives to show up and vote who normally don't vote in school board elections, but there's a disconnect. Despite the best efforts and involvement of the county Republican Party and many, many volunteers who went out and knocked doors and made phone calls and worked their hearts out, we fell short of what we might have been able to do. And instead of now having a majority on the Tulsa School Board that is for accountability for our school leadership, we'll have 3 out of 7 who have shown a willingness to at least question, well, really 2 conservatives and someone on the left side politically who's shown a willingness to question Deborah Gist, the superintendent. We might have had a majority had Tim prevailed. This is the kind of money that was involved in this race. $35,805 was raised by Susan Lampkin, the candidate that won in District 7. That's for, going back a step here, so about 4,800 votes were cast. $35,000 were spent to reach those 4,800 voters that actually showed up. In Shauna Keller, who ran against the incumbent that was defeated by Alina Ashley, $14,000 was raised. And that was this is just as of a week or 2 before the election. So it's very likely that more money came into the race and was spent before the election was over. In the Union District, Chris McNeil, who is the incumbent, Shelley Gortney actually forced him into a runoff, which was wonderful. Came 11 votes shy of passing him and about 50 votes shy of winning outright in the primary, but money flowed into his race from Democratic donors. And you see some of the names here. George Crumey, he's 99 years old, he'll turn 100 in December. He's a retired oil man. If there's a Democratic candidate out there, he will be a maximum donor to that Democratic candidate, and he gave money to Susan Lampkin, he gave money to Shauna Keller, he gave $5,800 to Chris McNeil out in Union. Why is it important to a massive Democrat donor to give money to a guy running for 1/5 of the Union School District for an unpaid position, as Jesse noted? Bert Holmes, maximum donor to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. He occasionally gives to Republicans. He gave some money to Governor Stitt. I think he tends to give money. The pattern looks like he's giving money to people that he wants to have a little bit of influence with. But mostly he gives to Democrats, and he gives massively to Democratic Party committees. And he gave money to the candidates running in the Tulsa Public School District, to Susan Lampkin and Shauna Keller. Kathy Taylor, our former Democratic mayor, big-time liberal, she gave money to Lampkin and Keller. Then there are the foundation connections. So what do I mean by foundations? There are some very influential family foundations, philanthropic organizations that give money to lots of different nonprofits. And they're involved in our public school system. The George Kaiser Family Foundation, one of their big projects is something called Tulsa Educare. This is early childhood education. If you go out and you find George Kaiser's giving pledge, he's one of a number of billionaires who were encouraged by Warren Buffett to pledge to give away all their money instead of passing it along to their children. That's a very noble thing. And to make a statement saying, here's what I intend to accomplish with what I'm giving, with what I'm setting aside, not for my own wants and needs, but for the benefit of the public. And early childhood education is his big focus. When you read it, the thing that really struck me is he's a materialist. So he sees things in terms of the genetic lottery. He feels like he won the genetic lottery. He understands that not everybody has the luck in inheriting intelligence and whatever it is he got from his parents in that respect. Although he neglects, in some ways, the benefits that people get from their parents simply by having their parents around. One of the keys to avoiding poverty in life is to wait until you're married to have kids, to finish high school, and then to stay married. And if you do those three things, you're almost certain to not fall into poverty and not pass that poverty on to future generations. But that sort of thinking is pretty much absent from the big Tulsa philanthropies and their way of thinking about things. And so Tulsa Educare, which is a project that's undertaken in partnership with Tulsa Public Schools, is a big project for the Kaiser Foundation, and you see a lot of people connected, not his name directly, not George Kaiser's name, but Ken Levitt, the executive director of the George Kaiser Family Foundation, Fred Dorwart, who serves on the board of the Kaiser Family Foundation, the Tulsa Community Foundation, the University of Tulsa, and his law firm does the legal work for many of these entities. If you want to really delve deeply into this, a fellow named Michael Mason, who published This Land Press for many years, and is on the progressive side of things politically, but he started to delve into this with a class of journalism students several years ago, and really explored all the different avenues of control the small group of people have in Tulsa with our nonprofits and with government. You may know that our mayor, G.T. Bynum, before he was mayor, had a lobbying firm and was a lobbyist registered at the U.S. Capitol. And one of his clients was the George Kaiser Family Foundation. And among his projects, he was there to lobby about the high rate of female incarceration in Oklahoma, and about early childhood education. So these priorities, G.T. Bynum was up there as a paid water carrier for the George Kaiser Family Foundation before we elected him to be our mayor. And you see these, Phil Lakin, leading city councilor, probably going to be the next mayor. So this is the sort of thing you could just get in your car and turn on the radio, or the alarm would go off in the morning and you'd get a little bit of information even if you weren't actively seeking it out. And that's not there anymore. We used to have alternative newspapers. I wrote a column for Urban Tulsa Weekly for just shy of 4 years. They went out of business in 2013. They were unusual. Most of these tabloid alt weeklies are liberal. There were pro-life conservatives running that paper, and it went away. We still have the Tulsa Beacon, thankfully, but that tends to reach people who are very deliberate about seeking out that information. Email. There was a time when people actually read all their emails because they weren't overwhelmed with how many they got. Local bloggers. I started blogging in 2003, and then people joined me. Individuals who had other jobs, other things to be doing, but they volunteered their time. They went to public meetings, they took video, they took photos, they wrote articles about it. And we all had this sort of interaction where we shared information and encouraged people to read each other's blogs. And nothing was happening on social media at that point. It was all happening in blog sites. That's all kind of gone away, and many of those people got a little burned out and stopped writing. And to be honest, my productivity has slowed down quite a bit over the years. Social media used to be that when you subscribed to somebody's page or you friended somebody on Facebook or followed somebody on Twitter, you saw everything that they put out there. And now, if you put out a message on Facebook the day before the election saying, hey, tomorrow you need to remember to get out and vote, Facebook throttles that information. And your friends will see it on their Facebook feeds on Friday. I've seen it happen time and again. I'm looking, Friday after an election, I'm flipping through Facebook, and I'm seeing messages from my friends saying, don't forget to get out and vote tomorrow. If they see a date, if the algorithm sees a date, if they see a link to a website that's somewhere else, if they see me post a link to my own website, they will suppress it. There may be ideological reasons they're doing that. There's also financial reasons. They want to force anybody who actually has a message to reach the public to pay them to get that message out. direct mail was something that used to work. And nowadays, you've got to put out, if you're going to put out a direct mail piece to reach the voters, it's got to be something that they will notice and look at in the 10 seconds it takes to walk from the mailbox to the trash can. Because it's not, they're not going to read a letter, they're not going to read a magazine. You have about 10 seconds to make an impression with direct mail. Phone calls, people don't answer the phone. You know, it's somebody trying to sell you a timeshare, it's somebody trying to extend your auto warranty, it's some scammer somewhere, and if you don't recognize the number, you don't answer the call. And most people don't even have landlines. Phone calls are not a way around the media anymore. Door knocking, people are less inclined to answer the door now. And I'm sure Alina saw that in canvassing. And you can still do it, you still try to do it, you still leave flyers on people's doors, but the number of people who will open the door to talk to you is greatly decreased. So how do we get around that? One of the things that I keep thinking is that what we lack is an effective, permanent political organization. So what typically happens, somebody comes up to filing period time and you think, hey, there's nobody running for this seat. And I think maybe God's calling me, leading me to run for this seat. I've had friends tell me that I ought to run for this seat. And so that candidate then has to build his own political organization from scratch, find a consultant, hopefully somebody that's actually principled and godly and is not just out for the money. And you've got to find volunteers, and you've got to find donors, and you've got to do that all yourself. And because you've built that yourself, you're not really inclined, if you're successful, to share that with anyone else once you've built it. People who have built that kind of organization and have gone on to serve in higher offices typically don't want to share that organization with anyone else. So what about the political parties? Can a Republican Party serve that role? Well, possibly it could, but for reasons of history, going back to some reforms about 100 years ago, we said we don't want smoke-filled rooms. We don't want a bunch of guys in a room behind closed doors deciding who's going to run for public office. And we want the people to choose, and so we're going to have primary elections where anyone who wants to register as a Republican can decide who's going to represent the Republican Party in the election. In the interest of transparency and democracy, that was what we did 100 years ago. But the result is that somebody who has no attachment to Republican principles, if they've got enough money, if they can make themselves look good enough, they can get themselves elected, and the Republican Party organization is obliged to support the winner of the primary by the party rules. They can't pick and choose between candidates running. So if there is a rhino running in a primary for state house and there's a good conservative running, the Republican Party doesn't have the ability to say, I'm going to support the actual conservative. They have to stay neutral in the primary and then support the winner in the general election. And it's very rare you pretty much have to be a Klansman, like David Duke was in Louisiana back in the 90s, for the Republican Party to say, I'm not going to support the nominee, because it's just the way it works. So in some ways, the party organization is hamstrung, and because of that, volunteers don't want to volunteer for just a party, because I might end up having to volunteer to help a rhino get elected, and I don't want to do that. Donors aren't going to just give to the party, because that might mean my money's going to support a rhino to get elected and then badly govern once they get to Oklahoma City or Washington, so I don't want to do that. So the party gets starved of resources and interest and enthusiasm because of this requirement to be neutral. But we need to have some way to attract resources, connect those resources with the needs, to connect volunteers with good candidates, to identify good candidates, and motivate them to run and support them and help them develop, help identify leaders as they, young men like Adam Jones, we saw here, to find people like that and say, here, we're going to help you learn, maybe get jobs in the system and find your way through to be better positioned to run for office and to serve a godly purpose in office. And we need to communicate effectively. We need to do testing. You know, marketing firms will do A/B testing. We've got this message for advertising our latest caffeinated energy drink, and we've got this message, and we're going to try both of them, and we're going to try different media. We're going to try a magazine ad, we're going to try a TV ad, and we're going to see which one does a better job of reaching people with the money we're spending. We need political organization to do that kind of thing. We need feedback. I see candidates all the time, and I've, over the years, have helped candidates, because I'm a computer guy and I do stuff with data. I've helped candidates put together walking lists and phone lists and mailing lists and figuring out how to reach people. The thing that always frustrates me is when I see there's no feedback effort. There's no attempt to close that loop and to see if what I'm putting out is actually making an impact on the people I'm trying to reach. So we need to have an organization that's doing that, that's actually polling and surveying and finding ways to determine if the messaging is having an impact. And we need to be watching government all the time, not just right before the election, not just doing opposition research on candidates after filing happens, and we know who we're facing on the ballot, but we need to be watching year-round to see who we need to get rid of because they're doing things in boards and committees and authority meetings that are hurting our city, our state, our country. This has got to be a permanent, full-time effort. I don't know how to put that together, but I think it needs to exist. And with that, that's really all I had to say this morning. I hope you found it helpful. Please visit batesline.com. I'm going to have some articles linked up there later today. I've already kind of got it queued up. I'll make a couple of edits and get that posted. Batesline.com will give you a lot of further reading if you want to go a little deeper with some of the things I've talked about this morning. Thank you.